Hello everyone, welcome back to the Analyst for 18th of November 2023. Here we'll be trying to understand the most important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. Now, the very first article is regarding DAKSHIN, that is a term which has been introduced by the Prime Minister of India related to Global South. Next, we will be trying to understand the local reservations that the legislature of Haryana made and the recent judgment of the Punjab and Haryana court regarding that. Next, we'll be studying about the new age digital threats that are facing the entire world today and the recent speech made by our Prime Minister. Next, we'll be trying to understand the recent developments of the Reserve Bank of India regarding the capital to risk-weighted assets ratio. And finally, we'll be concluding the discussion with the miniature paintings. This is very significant for our prelims. Today's very first article is regarding DAKSHIN because recently the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, recently inaugurated a global center for excellence for the global south countries, which is known as DAKSHIN. Now this will be serving as a platform that we are going to study soon. The Prime Minister noted that he had proposed setting up this center during the very first Voice of Summit that took place before the G20 meeting. Now why we are discussing this? Because from our syllabus of GS2 we have two aspects. First, we need to know about the bilateral regional groupings that is pertaining to India's interests, and also we need to look at the various important international institutions, agencies and fora. Now here, before going into this DAKSHIN platform, let us discuss the very core aspect of this regarding the Global South. Now, before also discussing Global South, let me take you through the very contemporary world history. Now, according to Alfred Sauvy, who in 1952 coined the very terms known as the first world country, second world country and the third world country. Now, he actually referred very good reference to the French society that was divided before the French Revolution, that were between the nobility, clergy and the bourgeois. But by now, the world had already seen two world wars, right? And 1952 was a culmination of the formation of the United Nations and also the emergence of two global superpowers. First, it is the United States of America. Second, it is the USSR or the Soviet Union. So generally, he was referring to the first world country as the US, second world country as the countries which were dominated or say influenced by the Soviet Union, and the third world countries, he referred to those countries who were a part of the non-aligned movement. And please note that India was also a part of this non-aligned movement because India did not want to be a part of either the first world or the second world camps, because the first world camp was led by the US and which promoted say capitalism, and also it was in strife with the second world, which was the Soviet Union back then. So India, Yugoslavia, Egypt and various other like-minded countries, they tried not to be in any one of the poles of these two nations. That is why the very term came to be associated in this political sense of non-aligned movement and like-minded nations. But over a period of time, as we can see here, this is the usage of the word first world country, developing country and global south. If we can trace the usage of the very word third world countries, it peaked from around 1960s to around 2000s. This means that this term of third world was in usage in English literature, in scientific journals, in academic journals in a very big manner. Why? Because this term came to be now dissociated with political repercussions of say this non-aligned movement. It more came to be associated with countries that are called as banana republics. See, banana republics were generally a term which were coined by the West, which were coined by the Western media. It meant that these are the countries which were ruled by some dictators, which were known as tin pot dictators, and the country's conditions are very messy. It means that these third world countries, such as the countries which were located in Latin America, in Asia, in say the African continent, they were suffering from huge amount of poverty, illiteracy, low amounts of development, and very a negative image in the West. So these third world countries were associated with that. Moving on, this third world usage tended to be declining from, say, the disintegration of the Soviet Union. And then in the academic forums, the three terms began very prominent, which are the developing countries, or say the least developing countries, or the underdeveloped countries. But when we are talking about developing, underdeveloped, or say least developed, aren't we having some standards of developed? Aren't we referring that there are some countries which are developed? Correct? If we say that there are some developed nations, we obviously will be referring to the Western nations. So why we are saying that the Western nations should be developed, or so they be called developed, right? So aren't we setting some preconceived notions, or say preconceived standards based on them, right? So that is why these terms were also not continued for a long period of time. As we can see, again, the usage of the word developing nations are right now coming down, because this is placing the emphasis of development on the Western model, which is not inclusive for the entire world. And that's why since the 1960s only, there was an American author and activist, Carl Oglesby, who termed the word Global South, which is kind of not a geographical term, because as we can understand, as we can look in the map here that is being shown here, we can see that the countries marked in green are typically referred to as Carl Oglesby as the Global South. As we can see, these have countries not pertaining to any geographical north or southern hemisphere countries, no, because there are countries like India and China which totally lie to the north of the northern hemisphere, right, or say the equator. So we can understand that this does not have any geographical condition. What it has is that the very first idea that Oglesby had was the war in Vietnam, because the war, or say the Vietnam War, was a watershed moment in international politics, because it was said that the Vietnam War was a proxy war between the US and the USSR, that is the first world and the second world country, and the war took place in a third world nation according to the term back then. So it was understood that the global north, which was also consisted of the developed countries such as Russia and the US back then, it was kind of dominating the global south. And that is why the war in Vietnam culminated in this manner. And we can understand, apart from this, apart from the Vietnam War conditions, we have to understand that the European colonialism that took place in these nations such as India, such as China and Southeast Asian nations, and also Latin American nations, African nations, these all countries have a history of subjugation under the imperialist forces. So this is also a characteristic of this kind of nations. Next, the Cold War divided these nations on the basis of the allegiance that they had with the US or the USSR. And these also led to the domino theory and the prevalence of proxy war that took place from 1960s to around 90s when the Soviet Union collapsed. We can understand the domino theory is that the US had this idea that the communism as a political agenda ideology was very far prevalent, or say spreading in the rest of the world apart from the US dominated poles. So the US thought that if communism would infect one country, it will lead to the infection of several other countries, or it is just like the falling or tipping of one domino that is reflecting the fall in the rest of the cards, or say rest of the dominoes. So this is what we have to understand the background of this term is. And we have to understand that when the term was coined, it was clearly seen that the South, it was totally distinct from the North. And this is not a geographical term, it is a totally geopolitical terms reflected by various dimensions. And we have to understand that the global South, according to dependency theorists, right, they have some conditions in mind. Now, dependency theory is that theory. It says that there are some nations which are known as core nations. Core nations are those advanced economies such as the US. Now, they have advanced technologies, they have advanced manufacturing capabilities and also military power. And there are some peripheral nations which are on the verge of development. Right? They are seeing their economy still at the nascent stage or in the mid stages. So accordingly, there are some peripheral nations in the world such as India, such as the continent of Africa. These are some peripheral nations that are actually directly or indirectly in some manner dependent on the West. So we have to understand the dependency theory in this manner. And also, we have to understand the series of, or say the chain of dependence. Firstly, it is the international division of labor. For example, right now, we often hear the term global value chains. What does this mean? For example, say any product that is produced internationally. Let us take the example of iPhones. It is being designed in the US. It is being assembled in countries like say India, China, even the Southeast Asian nations. And finally, it is being marketed by some other nations, right? It is finally being imported and being sold at the particular nations. So a particular product has been broken down into supply chain and the division of labor has been maintained internationally. Now we have to understand when it comes to the international division of labor, the main aspects of some managerial roles is with the developed nations such as the US, whereas the laborious aspects of say assembling the smartphones, for example, is with the countries which are developing as of now, such as India. So we have to understand this is the very distinction in this manner. Next, we have to understand that the flow of foreign capital is always from the global north to the global south nations. And also, the technological dependence is also from the contours of the western nations to the global south. So they are being dependent on this. And finally, these all are breeding these global inequalities all over the world. So the World Bank is observing as of now in 21st century, this is not the case anymore. The World Bank is saying that there is now a shift of global wealth. How? Because starting from the 1980s, when countries like say South Korea and say after 2000s, country like China and India, they are on the rise. That is why it is being said that 21st century is the age of Asian nations. That is the wealth is being shifted from North Atlantic region to Asia Pacific region, and that is why right now we all over the world or all over the newspapers, in the social media, we hear the Asia Pacific or the Pacific Ocean term, because this is now a very, very important term, because also according to Standard Chartered, which is a famous international bank, it says by 2030 the Asian GDP will be around 35% of the global GDP, which was around 20% in 2010. So we can understand the footsteps that the Asian nations are right now taking will be overstepping the global north in the coming period of time. So there will be a potential power imbalance when the countries such as the Western countries will be challenged directly by nations such as China, India and Indonesia, as being stated by the Chartered Bank. See here, it is saying that China will be the number one country by 2030 according to PPP terms, purchasing parity. Then India will be coming to dominate, then US and Indonesia. So the top four nations will be in this manner. So that is why we have to understand that global south is a very, very important term right now. Then we have to understand, but right now, when we have great amount of potential in the 21st century, but there are some issues too. The very first issue is the hangover of the colonial empire that was, subjugating the global south over, last hundreds or say 200s of years. They are still, suffering from this severe lack of infrastructure, lack of, proper rules and regulations. So this colonial hangover is still there, especially in African nations. They are being severely overexploited. Even nations now, such as France or Germany, they are offering their condolences to Africa regarding the same. Next, we have to understand the historical injustice due to this imperial rule is spanning over various sectors. For example, the people who are resident or the citizens of this global south, they are consumers. They are not the producers, because the producers are whom? The global north nations. Because they are supplying the capital, they are supplying the technology for producing the various goods and services. So they are reduced to being consumers. And this is a very, very, potential claim for dependency. So they are being dependent on the Western nations. Next, we have to understand the amount of poverty and inequality spread between the global south nation is also very high. Then we have to understand the amount of environmental degradation that is also being attributed to this is mostly seen in the global south nations rather than the global north nations. So we have to understand this is the very cause of this historical injustice. But also there are some new age conflicts, such as the West is still now meddling in internal affairs, right? Because we have seen the recent cases of, say, Ukraine-Russia crisis, where the West is, meddling via this NATO in this crisis. Even in the current ongoing Israel-Palestine issue, we have seen that the US have time and again made statements in this matter. So they continue meddling in these internal affairs of countries despite the outcome that they faced after the Vietnam War. Then we have to understand the growing amount of nationalism in the West. Now the Western countries like Germany, US, they are seeing a wave of, say, right-wing ideologies which are fueling their nationalism. And this is very, very dangerous. Why? Because this will be breeding other issues like protectionism, currency manipulation by them to actually manipulate the global trade. And mind you, they have great economic powers and military powers of their own. Now, also, this is a time of digital imperialism because the world is being dominated by few corporations such as Facebook, such as Google, right, which are, dominating the entire world scenario by using their digital scenario. Now, these digital scenarios will be including the social media, the algorithms, right? And these companies like Meta and Twitter and various other social media companies, they are essentially located in the US. So these are all the issues that are being still faced. But here, when we are talking about India also being a part of the global south, we have to understand India and China are those two nations which are one of the two largest nations in this global south according to their economic and also political power. So India must be assuming leadership conditions in this manner, because we have to understand India is always supporting inclusive, representative and progressive world order. India is hoping for a multipolar world order which is also inclusive of the all ideals and the culture of the global nations, apart from China, which is also part of the global south. China is not believing in the same, because China is also being very aggressive both economically and politically with both its neighbors and the rest of the world. So we have to understand in this manner, India has this very good responsibility of spearheading the global south. And in this, India, just before the G20 meet, it had pioneered this voice of global south, which is actually giving the representation to all of the nations of global south, and India is spearheading that. In the same manner, now we are coming to the context of this article today. India has recently inaugurated this DAKSHIN. It is the Development and Knowledge Sharing Initiative Global South Center for Excellence. Now this is what? Here, this is a platform for sharing key outcomes achieved in the G20 meetings that took place in India under India's presidency over this year. And it will be also highlighting the various challenges that will be bringing in public awareness, and also it will be building the awareness among various policymakers and the Western nations regarding the same. And it will be serving as a platform for the entire world to witness. Then the theme is that together for everyone's growth with everyone's trust, and Global South together for one future. So India is taking good steps in this manner. Then we have to understand that there is huge amount of optimism ahead, because according to our Prime Minister, he has said, and you can use this quotes in your answers prominently, that Global South has always existed as a geographical entity, but it is now getting a voice for the very first time. Because right now we have to understand through various agendas, such as the enlargement of the BRICS, as it is scheduled for 1st of, say, January, or say the first month of 2024. The BRICS will be, welcoming nations such as Argentina and Iran and other nations, also the UAE. Then also the loss and damage fund, which was a very serious issue for the West, because the West never wants to compensate their own share for climate responsibilities. Whereas at COP27, at the Sharm el Sheikh declaration, at the COP27 UNFCCC, so the world has agreed to provide this loss and damage fund, but still the finalities are not yet finally yet. But still the agreement is very significant for the Global South because it is being able to pioneer support in this manner. Then also the recent claimor and also the ongoing claimors for UNSC reforms or the United Nations Security Council reforms is also ongoing debate that is going on right now. And also the countries from the G77 nation from which India is also a part of, they're violently or say they're vehemently arguing for the change in these reforms of UNSC. Now, India is also sparing the South, and also some recent announcement that was made recently as of now that India will be recently launching the AI Artificial Intelligence Global Partnership Summit. Now here India believes that the new technology of AI and its challenges should not widen the gap between the Global South and the Global North, because in the AI race the Global North is very far ahead of the Global South. So that is why India should also be converging all of the countries in this manner. Second, the education ministers meet alongside the same second Global Voice Summit. It said that they will be reducing the digital divide in students, in schools, in colleges, in all of the Global South nations. According to National Educational Policy 2020, India's own domestic policy is to reduce the domestic or say the digital gap and also increase the gross enrollment ratio of the Indian youth. It is also pioneering the same changes in rest of the Global South nations. And also we have to understand that India has also welcomed all of the Global South countries to join the Global Biofuel Alliance, from which Brazil and US is also a part of. Right? So this Global Biofuel Alliance will lead to not only say regional and say global leadership for India, also a better sustainable future for the whole world. Next, India is also looking to enhance its supply chain integration, because we have to understand the supply chain integration is very strong in nations such as Vietnam, in China, in South Korea, where India is also willing to take part via the PLI scheme or production link incentive scheme. But India is also not being very selfish in this matter. It is trying to diversify the supply chain integration to the rest of the Global South nations. And also we have to understand the topics of this Global South were included in the New Delhi Declaration of G20. So India is taking a very good role in this matter, and also this is prominently reflected after the G20 ended. The African Union also got membership, and this was due to India's own efforts. So you can have some very good solid points if any question comes on the Global South in this matter. In this next one, recently the Punjab and Haryana High Court struck down a law which was passed by the state government of Haryana that mandated 75% reservation for the locals of Haryana having a monthly salary of less than 30,000 in private sector jobs. Why this is important? Because in GS2 again, we have Indian Constitution, historical underpinnings, evolution, features of Indian Constitution, and also the basic structure. Now, let us understand before discussing the various aspects, right? The very ideal of reservations. See, reservations means that you are giving, or say the government or the state is giving some affirmative action or say some benefits to some classes or so some sections of the society based on their historical and social backwardness, right? It is a kind of an affirmative action. That is an action made to bring in equity in the society. Because you have to understand, while we say that we all human beings are equal, but our backgrounds, our social conditions, our past are not equal. There are some sections, some disadvantaged sections of the population that do not get equal opportunities in the public arena. There are several historical injustices. For example, the tribals in India, they were persecuted from their forest lands. The various castes in India, they were persecuted of various social backwardness. So we have to understand that we have to redress, we have to give solution to their present conditions right now. And this is actually also the very ideal of the founding fathers of our Indian constitutions too. Then we have to understand, not only we have to have proper representation of say the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, the OBCs, the EWS in our societies, we have to understand that they, according to their representation, their social transformation is also very, very important, right? We have to totally transform their lives, their livelihood, so that their future generations do not live in this amount of injustice. we have to understand that the various caste and class inequalities still exist in India, and that is a very sad and true fact that is still now. So we have to understand these inequalities should not be there in a country where the father of the nation talked about the various ideals of truth and satyagraha, right? Then we have to understand that due to these caste inequalities and various imbalances, often we see various social tensions and conflicts. We see various communal disharmony, some violence taking place, right? So this is also a matter for concern. Then we have to understand, not only we are talking of the entire section of population as a whole, we have to also identify that the gender aspect of discrimination is also very, very serious. So we have to also consider that gender is also a very, very important role when we are talking about reservation for women too. So this is the rationale of reservation in India as of now. And what are the legal aspects of reservation? Under article we know that we have a right to equality. So no citizens should be denied of this opportunity of equality. Next, in Article 15, we have to understand that there is no discrimination based on the grounds only of religion, race, caste, gender or place of birth, right? So it is being clearly said that in this matter, when we are discussing this local reservation, Article 15 said that there cannot be any distinction or say discrimination based on the place of birth. But there are some exceptions for women and children, and we have to understand there for women there can be some educational institution or say reservation of seats on public transports. This is an exception. Also under the clause 4 of Article 15, we have in tandem with Article 29 clause 2 that socially and educationally backward classes can be exempted from this Article 15 too. When we talk of the SCs and STs and OBCs, so these articles do not apply to them because they are a part of this rationale. Then we have to understand under clause 5 and also in tandem with Article 19, educational institutions can also be exempted from this, right? Except Article 30, where minority educational institutions are exempted from this again. And also we have to understand recently, as of now, the economically weaker sections are also exempted from this Article 15. So we can understand, in no way we are saying that we can get some local people or say people domiciled in one particular area of a state are getting any preference for reservation. It is only talking about say women or children, educationally and socially backward classes, educational institution, and also concerning the same and also EWS. Nowhere we are seeing place of birth here. Now Article 16 talks about public employment now. Public employment means that you are getting employment and office of appointment at the government offices, and that is also prevented any discrimination based on religion, race, caste, sex, descent, place of birth, residence. Again we are seeing place of birth and residence. On this basis you cannot be discriminated. And here there is one small caveat that under clause 3 it is the only parliament that can through a legislation require a residence in state or UT for appointment of any state say public office or say local body public office. In no way it is saying that a state legislature assembly will be having power to enact a law. It is not having the power. It is having, only the parliament is having the power here. So according to that, parliament has enacted an act known as the Public Employment Requirement as to Residence Act of 1957. Here it has totally banned the use of say using residence or place of birth as a employment. But here there are states like say Andhra Pradesh, Manipur, Tripura, Himachal Pradesh who for their special conditions, special provisions, special requirements they have been exempted. Under Article 16, clauses 4, 4A, 4B, 4C, there are reservations for SC, ST, OBC, EWS, as we popularly know, right? We have a 50% ceiling on SC, ST, OBC's reservation and 10% out of the general reservation for the EWS. So, in no way again, in both 15 and 16 articles of the Constitution, we are seeing that we cannot be discriminated on this matter. Under Article 19, and clauses and subclauses D, E, G, the citizens have the right to move freely, reside and settle and carry out any profession, occupation, or trade or business of their liking in or say throughout the territory of India. Again, we are understanding that according to the place of birth, right, that is your right to, right, and according to Article 19, it is your also another right to carry out any profession throughout the territory of India. Obviously, there are some regional restrictions, right, but in no way the local domicile is being seen as a reasonable restriction, in no way. Also, we have to understand there are some special provisions, as I stated earlier also. According to Article 371 D and E clauses, some special provisions for jobs and education for the states of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana have been provided, but this is also for some special areas of this region, for example some backward regions. So we have to understand for some special conditions the provision is there, but in no way the blanket immunity is given. But here Haryana legislature enacted this quota law. This quota law provided around 75% reservation, and this law was applicable for a period of 10 years. Here unskilled, semi-skilled and even skilled jobs were actually reserved for the local or say domiciled persons of Haryana, where the salary is less than say 30,000 per year. So this was actually brought up to the attention of the court, but according to the arguments by the state government, that is the state of Haryana, they gave several arguments which were actually present in the statement of objects and reasons of the bill. Actually, before a bill is introduced to the legislature, the government has to give a reason why they are introducing this bill. That is actually known as the statement of objects and reasons of the bill. So in any bill, also at the parliament level, you will be finding the statement of reasons. In their statement of reasons and also in the same arguments that they made at the High Court of Punjab and Haryana, they said that this bill or say this reservation, this act is to protect the right to life and livelihood of the people domiciled in the state, because according to them, according to the Haryana state, they are saying that there are many migrants which are coming in from the rest of the country who are targeting the low paid jobs, and in these low paid jobs the local youth of Haryana is being left out, and it is putting a major stress on the local infrastructure and the housing sector. And also they are saying that in the urban areas the proliferation of slums can be attributed to migrant populations, and this is also indirectly and directly fueling environmental and health issues of the local people of Haryana, and it is kind of challenging the unemployment rates which are quite high in Haryana too. So they are saying to boost local employment, to protect and the environment, the urban spaces, to reduce the proliferation of slums, it is imperative to bring this bill. And here it is claimed, the government too claimed that it has the support of the industry. So these were the arguments that the state governments have for their matter. But here the Supreme Court, the judiciary has time and again said in various cases and pronouncements that this is not the case here. In Dr. Pradeep Jain versus the Union of India, the very term sons of soil was termed. This means that the persons which are domiciled in a state, right, they are the sons of that particular state and hence the soil. So the reservation for them is totally unconstitutional, but in this case, why? Because this case was of a kind of a different matter, the court did not explicitly rule here. In the next case, Sunanda Reddy versus the state of Andhra Pradesh, the case of 1995, Supreme Court referred to Pradeep Jain case here, the earlier case, and specifically ruled against the appointment of various public officials which were given a reservation of 5% for the speakers of Telugu language in the state of Andhra Pradesh. It was totally termed as unconstitutional and violative of the basic structure of the constitution. Next, in 2002, the Supreme Court invalidated the applicants belonging to the district or the rural areas of the district concerned in the state of Rajasthan, which were concerning the appointment of teachers in particular schools which were domiciled in that particular district. It was also struck down. Then again in 2019, the Allahabad High Court totally invalidated another order by the UP subordinate commission, which termed or say which appointed some officials again domiciled in the region of the UP. So judiciary has been very clear that this cannot be going on. And here the same Punjab and Haryana High Court say that this legislation is standing ineffective. That means this is totally violative of the articles of 14, 15, 16 and 19 as we have discussed earlier too. Because also we have to understand not only it is against the spirit of the constitution and equality, it is beyond the power of the states to legislate on the matter, because parliament is having this case here, right? It is a parliament who can do this but not the states here. Then it is going beyond the reservation ceiling of 50%, right? That is also been validated by various Supreme Court cases that reservation cannot be going beyond 50% ceiling. It is going here. Then we have to understand that if a particular government, state government is mandating that we have to, or say the companies, if you are taking in locals, you have to submit quarterly reports, you have to have an authorized officer to call for records, inspect premises, that means office premises for the purpose of examining the reports, registers for this reservation case. It is actually again bringing back the Inspector Raj which India specifically abolished in 1991. So aren't we increasing the regulations on the government of the day? Then we have to understand this mere argument that the state governments do not have enough resources to provide employment to the unemployed youth. This is not enough, because the state government has enough incentives to attract investment from the private sector and set up more factories, offices that can indirectly create jobs later. So it is better to focus on infrastructural development that have long gestational periods that can have more employment opportunity. So this is not a good argument from the government. And also we have to understand that if we bring in these legislations, right, there will be Inspector Raj-like conditions where the existing investments will be going outside of the states, because the private individuals, they always want merit, right? They always want merit. And they want productive youth, they want productive people, instead of having some limited amount of, say, pool of candidates. They want candidates from all over the world. So they will not be happy with this. They will be taking out their investments according to the court, right? It will be leading to flight of existing investments, and also this will be leading to many more states enacting the same acts, and this is again purely against the constitution. This is also a roadblock for the labor law reforms that India is trying to take over a period of time, and also a potential for vote bank politics over a period of time. So this is a very, very important case to be discussed. Next, we have the various statements from the Prime Minister of India. He says that with the proliferation of the deepfakes in the recent past, is calling on the media to educate the people of its potential misuse of artificial intelligence. Now in GS3 we have challenges to internal security through communication networks, role of media and social networking sites in internal security, and here we will be looking at some new age digital threats. Now we have to understand, with the advent of digital areas and the age of the internet, while we are getting many economic opportunities and various other features of the internet, also we have to understand the systems are getting increasingly complex and very difficult for human beings to cope up and be at pace with the technologies. Recent, say digital threats, as we can list, some of them are deepfakes. Deepfakes also have been covered in the analyst earlier, is the manipulation of a fake video by using the face of another person, legitimizing the claim of the video. For example, there is a very popular deepfake of Barack Obama, the former US president, making some statements which he never made. So this was actually made by artificial intelligence. There is another threat of social engineering. Social engineering refers to the use of algorithms or complex programs that can lead to psychological changes in people's social media or say online behavior. For example, say this is actually used to create advertisements online. If you say Google search any particular, say, mobile phones, right, in the next minute only you will be seeing an advertisement related to that in Amazon app, right, for example. So this is one aspect of social engineering, that if you are searching for something, the same product for that will be made to you. Then we have to understand there is huge amount of misinformation prevalent everywhere in the form of, say, deep fakes, in the form of, say, fake news, right? So this misinformation is very dangerous, because these can lead to communal disharmony, riots and whatnot. This can also lead to potential malinformation, that is actually creating information in such a manner intentionally to totally create disharmony in the country and also the world. So this is also a thing. Then there are some terms known as zero-day vulnerabilities. These are actually the various loopholes, or say the various gray areas in software development which the software developers are not aware of, and where the hackers and the various malicious people, they take advantage of the various loopholes in the particular software. Then we have automated cyber attacks which are taking place right now, specifically from illegal hackers from Russia, China, who have an aim to totally amplify the entire online system. Also, we are seeing a new term known as cryptojacking, which is actually a way in which bitcoins are actually mined in particular computers which are actually outside the chain of blockchain. For example, if you have a powerful computer of your own, but you are not part of any blockchain, so what the cyber criminals will be doing, they will be deliberately breaking into your system and using your own computer power for generation of bitcoins, which is illegal, and also utilizing your own power and increasing your electricity bills. Next, we have phishing. Phishing means that you are, intentionally, you are increasing the amount of fake emails and say advertisement to a large amount of people at the same time. This is just like phishing in real life. You just cast a net and you wait for the potential victims to fall in your net. This can be various fraud calls and various other malintentions. There is phishing's sinister sister known as vishing. Vishing refers to voice phishing. That means the fraud calls that you get on your phones, right? That is actually called vishing. That you see that these people are extorting you for money. Then we have various malware and ransomware, which we popularly also know as computer viruses, which infect your computer files and also right now mobile files in exchange for say ransoms. Also in exchange to extract all your personal data in form of say malware. Then there is also a popular term known as juice jacking, which refers to the stealing of data from any public charging spots. Say you have many public charging spots all over the say airports or say railways. If you say charge using their own ware, right, it will be leading to a potential gender of your data being leaked to the cyber criminals, because they totally dewire the charging systems and they install their own programs that can extract your data in that manner. And also we have AI powered phishing, which is also known as the digital chameleon, because right now AI behavior is very becoming close to the human being's behavior, and here the AI also is having these powerful phishing tendencies. So that is why we understand that we have various cyber threats as of now. This is impacting the social fabric. This is totally robbing the people of their money, putting the elderly at risks, right? This is also challenging the digital literacy in India. Companies are being targeted, and this is leading to their profitability and their stability. According to CERTIN, which is cyber security agency in India, there is one cybercrime every 10 minutes in India in 2017, and in 2023 this is obviously on a higher manner. And there are new forms of terrorism right now. Terrorists have totally gone online these days, and they're using various instruments such as even the dark net, which is a very hidden version of the internet, to carry out their operations, and very successfully they are doing so right now. The demographic changes as of now in India, if you can talk of, right, the country will be seeing a demographic dividend in the next 20 to 30 to 40 years even. And here the amount of youth is going to increase over a period of time, and the amount of working population age is also increasing over a period of time. And these cyber security threats are actually targeted at these people too. And the amount of algorithm bias and amount of say the effects of this cyber criminal activity they can have on the youth, and they can totally destabilize their careers too. Then we have to understand the various geopolitical tensions that arise out of these cases. This is also very severe.
because we can understand the recent instances, point out so. The digital infrastructure in this matter, we have to understand, is very, very important for countries to invest in. And that is why the government of India has taken some steps. The first is the National Cyber Security Policy 2013. It is setting up the National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center, which is monitoring the online cyber crimes. Then we have CERT-In under the Ministry of Electronics and Information Commission Technology, which is securing the Indian cyberspace. Then we have Cyber Surakshit Bharat Initiative, which was launched in 2018 and spreading awareness all over India. Then we have Cyber Crisis Management Plan, which is totally dedicated towards combating this. Then we have National Cyber Coordination Center, Cyber Swachh Kendra, which is actually encouraging people to conduct regular security scans on their smartphones and tablets and PCs to be alert of ransomware, juice jacking, and various threats. And finally, we also have Information Security Education and Awareness Project. Here, the way ahead is that the Prime Minister rightfully said that just like we have special warnings on the packet of cigarettes, right? We should have the same on these cyber products such as deepfakes. We should have same. According to the World Economic Forum, it is saying that the countries right now need to transform traditional governance structure that is not actually dependent on cyber security measures or not actually framing cyber security guidelines. They should be now making more agile methods of governance. And in this matter, the Indian government is also being very agile right now. According to various deepfakes which are circulating in the social media right now, recently IT Ministry also warned the platforms to take down any content within 36 hours, which is actually also enshrined in the IT rules of 2021, and urged that due diligence must be exercised with reasonable restrictions. So that is the thing there, that India is also becoming very agile nowadays. And apart from this, India must also require new thinking on how to combat new emerging technologies such as say bioengineering, right? Algorithms. So India must be trying to predict how best to, combat these technologies. They must also be putting emphasis on personal privacy, right? And also certain forms of research, like say biological engineering, like say the amount of AI race that is going on, right? So these are having some potential dangers of say even replacing people's job apart from the cyber security, threats that they pose, right? That is why the recent research that is also going on, they must be halted for a certain period of time. And that is why the legislatures, the regulators, the private business people, the civil society, they must all come together on this matter as soon as possible, because right now we are seeing this case of misinformation and new age digital threats. Now, the next article is about the Reserve Bank of India, and right now the RBI has decided to increase the risk weight on the exposure of banks to consumer credit cards and so on. Now, this is very important for prelims, because we have to understand this ratio of CRAR. Now CRAR and CA are totally identical, so let us discuss regarding the same. Now say when a bank is operating, we know a bank's assets are what? Bank's assets are say the office space its own, right? The loans it's offered, because from the loans the banks will be getting interest. So generally loans are a kind of assets for the banks, right? And also the banks have some liabilities. Liabilities are like the people's deposits with the bank. So according to official guidelines and also according to RBI guidelines, banks' capitals are the difference between assets and liabilities. The higher the bank's capitals are, the better is the bank off. We can understand the more asset it can have, the better the bank is productive and the better the bank can service its customers. There is another term known as RWA or risk-weighted assets, from where profits may not come due to say low quality of loans or collateral. Now let me explain you. Now say the loan is an asset for the bank. Now when you go for a loan, you will be doing what? You will be giving a security deposit or say collateral. Often there are some loans such as credit cards, right? Such as say some loans given by NBFCs, non-banking financial corporations, which do not take any collaterals. So there are also some kind of loans which do not have any collateral. So these loans are actually known as unsecured loans, which do not have any collateral, and these loans are very, very prone to risks. they are very risky. So RWA are those loans of the banks which are typically unsecured and from where profits from interest rates or say from any other profits will not come. So here we come to CRAR or CAR, which is capital adequacy ratio. Right now it is at 9% for all banks in India. It means that the amount of money that the banks may have to compensate for the amount of RWA or risky assets that they have. It is very understand that the more risky assets that the banks have, the higher capital or say the lower liability say the bank needs to have. Correct? So we have to understand for the recovery of loans of these risky loans, the banks need to have higher capital, right? So this is the CRAR, and according to RBI, it introduced the CRAR in 1992. The significance is that the banks must have sufficient capital to offset any future risk loss. Right? It is also protecting the depositors because ultimately the loans are given from the depositors' money only, right? By the banks. So this is also to protect the depositors and also the creditors. And it is also setting a standard for the banks that the governance of the banks has to be better. Now here, the recent changes regarding the RBI is that now the RBI is going to soon announce and right now advising the banks to keep higher CAR or CRAR. That means right now the banks have to keep higher capital or excess capital. And how can the bank keep higher capital? By giving less unsecured loans or offering more interest on existing loans. Right? So we can understand this will be affecting consumer loans, but this development will be typically excluding the loans which are having the collateral. For example, say housing loans, educational loans, vehicle loans, loans secured by say gold jewelry, right? So generally loans which are secured, they won't be having say any higher in lending or say increasing cost. These consumer loans will have. Then there is this increasing amount of risk weight due to this development by the RBI. Right? Because now the banks have to keep more credit or say more money with themselves, more assets with themselves, right? And here the consumer credit in terms of say credit cards and non-banking financial companies which generally lend kind of without say any collateral because they want their loans to be very marketed in a rapid period of time. So that is why we have to understand these changes has been made. And this is actually seen by many policy makers as a counter-cyclical measures because right now the economy is seeing a boom phase where there is excess money supply in the market. This can lead to an inflationary condition in the particular period of time in the future. That is why RBI is telling that right now we need to decrease the amount of money supply through these unsecured loans. And it is actually good for the long period of time. The final article is regarding the miniature painting. This is in the news because recently, B.N. Goswami, who was, Padma Bhushan recipient and also former IAS officer, he passed away, who was a very pioneer in the miniature painting scene in India. Now we have to understand that miniature paintings are highly detailed paintings on small scale. As we can see the painting here, this is a painting, which is named as the Princess of the House of Taimur. Right? It was by Abbas Samad. We can understand these paintings are having very historical significance because these are on a small scale and also having various intricate patterns. The very first miniature paintings, took place during the Buddhist Pala dynasty, where the very first were about, some symbols and symbolisms of Buddhism and Jainism, and they were painted on palm leaves. Later, the Mughals would totally pioneer this miniature paintings scenario, and these feature brightly colored paintings, and they use these paintings for their manuscripts and art books, and these were so intricate and so beautiful that it was according to experts right now, they say that the miniature painters back then used only a brush containing of a single strand of hair. So these were so intricate, they used a single hair on their brushes. Right, but they were on a decline after during the reign of Aurangzeb because he had a disdain for art and literature. So from his time, the migration of skilled artisans took place to the lower foothills of Himalayas and also in the states of say in the region of say Rajasthan. From there, Pahadi painting arose and Rajasthani painting also arose, where Pahadi painting and Rajasthani painting generally depicted scenes from Bhagavad Gita, local folklore, and also some secular subjects too. Then in the southern region of India, we also see the Deccan paintings that took place between say 16th and 19th century after the collapse of the Bahman Sultanate in 1520s. These paintings have generally Mughal influences, but also very, very important for prelims, these also have influences of European, Iranian and Turkish influences too. So this was all for today. I thank you very much for being a very patient audience. Till again, all the best for your preparation.